It is urgent to expose your soulmate due to an affair with your. Don't skip. Listen to this carefully. This message is for you, and your heart needs this right now, because what started as an ordinary day slowly turned into something nobody could have predicted. At first, everything seemed normal. The conversations felt normal. The routines felt normal. The people around your soulmate appeared exactly as they always had. Nothing looked suspicious. Nothing looked unusual. Nothing looked out of place. Yet sometimes the biggest secrets hide behind the most ordinary appearances. And listen to this. Your soulmate wasn't searching for problems. They weren't looking for drama. They weren't trying to uncover secrets. They were simply living their life. Trusting. Believing. Assuming everything was exactly as it appeared. Because your heart needs this right now, because trust often works that way. When we trust someone, we stop looking for evidence. When we trust someone, we stop questioning details. When we trust someone, we assume honesty. That assumption remained strong until one unexpected moment changed everything. And listen to this. The first sign seemed insignificant. A small detail. A brief interaction. A moment that would have gone unnoticed by almost anyone else. Yet something about it felt unusual. Not wrong. Just unusual. Your soulmate noticed it immediately. Then tried ignoring it. Then dismissed it. Then convinced themselves it meant nothing. Because that explanation felt easier. But the feeling refused to disappear. And your heart needs this right now, because intuition often notices patterns before logic understands them. The mind asks questions later. The instincts notice first. That instinct remained. Quiet. Persistent. Impossible to completely silence. And listen to this. Days passed. Life continued. The strange feeling should have faded. Yet somehow it became stronger. More observations appeared. More unusual moments appeared. More unanswered questions appeared. Individually they meant nothing. Together they began creating a pattern. A pattern your soulmate could no longer ignore. The puzzle pieces were beginning to appear. Even though the full picture remained hidden. And your heart needs this right now, because truth rarely arrives all at once. Truth usually arrives in fragments. Pieces. Clues. Moments. Observations. Small details that seem meaningless until they suddenly connect. That was exactly what was happening. And listen to this. One evening, your soulmate found themselves replaying recent events. Conversations. Messages. Interactions. Memories. At first they expected to find reassurance. Evidence that everything was fine. Evidence that their concerns were unnecessary. Instead they discovered something unexpected. The more they reflected, the more questions appeared. Not fewer. More. And every question seemed connected to the same uncomfortable possibility. A possibility they desperately hoped was wrong. Because your heart needs this right now, because sometimes the truth is frightening long before it is confirmed. The possibility alone can create anxiety. The possibility alone can create uncertainty. The possibility alone can change how someone views everything around them. That is exactly what happened. And listen to this. For several days they remained silent. Watching. Observing. Thinking. Trying to remain objective. Trying not to jump to conclusions. Trying not to assume the worst. Yet every attempt to dismiss the situation seemed to create another question. Another clue. Another inconsistency. The pattern kept growing. The mystery kept growing. The concern kept growing. And your heart needs this right now because repeated coincidences eventually stop feeling like coincidences. Repeated inconsistencies eventually demand explanation. Repeated questions eventually demand answers. Your soulmate had reached that point. The point where curiosity became concern. The point where concern became urgency. The point where urgency became impossible to ignore. And listen to this. One particular moment changed everything. A moment so small that most people would have overlooked it completely. Yet somehow it revealed more than anyone intended. A reaction. A glance. A conversation that ended too quickly. A detail that didn't fit. Something about it stood out immediately. And once it was noticed, it became impossible to forget. Your soulmate replayed the moment again and again. Searching for another explanation. Searching for another possibility. Searching for a reason it wasn't what it appeared to be. But every path led back to the same uncomfortable question. What if something important is being hidden? And your heart needs this right now because important questions have a way of demanding attention. They refuse to disappear. They refuse to remain unanswered. They continue growing until the truth finally appears. That question was growing now. Day by day. Moment by moment. Thought by thought. And listen to this. The hardest part wasn't the suspicion. The hardest part was the uncertainty. Not knowing. Wondering. Questioning. Living between possibility and reality. Because uncertainty creates its own kind of pressure. A pressure that slowly builds. A pressure that slowly grows. A pressure that eventually forces action. Your soulmate was beginning to feel that pressure. And your heart needs this right now because there comes a moment when remaining passive becomes impossible. A moment when answers become necessary. A moment when clarity becomes more important than comfort. That moment was approaching. Faster than expected. Closer than expected. More unavoidable than expected. And listen to this. For the first time, your soulmate stopped asking whether something was wrong. Instead, they started asking a different question. How much have I not seen yet? That question changed everything. Because once someone starts searching for truth, they begin noticing things they previously overlooked. Details become clearer. Patterns become visible. Connections become obvious. And suddenly the mystery begins revealing itself. Your soulmate had reached the beginning of that journey. The journey toward answers. The journey toward clarity. The journey toward a truth that was becoming harder to hide with every passing day. And deep down, they already sensed something important. The story was far from over. The biggest revelations had not appeared yet. The most important answers had not arrived yet. The most shocking discoveries were still waiting. If you enjoy spiritual and uplifting content, please subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. Don't skip. Listen to this carefully. This message is for you, and your heart needs this right now, because after days of uncertainty, unanswered questions, and strange coincidences, your soulmate finally reached a point where they could no longer ignore what was happening around them. Something felt wrong. Not obviously wrong. Not dramatically wrong. Just wrong enough to keep returning to their thoughts. And listen to this. At first, they tried convincing themselves they were overthinking. Maybe they were tired. Maybe they were imagining things. Maybe recent stress was making ordinary situations appear suspicious. That explanation felt reasonable. Comforting, even. Yet every time they accepted that explanation, another strange detail appeared. Another inconsistency. Another unanswered question. Another clue. And your heart needs this right now because truth has a strange habit of leaving traces behind. Tiny traces. Subtle traces. Almost invisible traces. Yet traces nonetheless. That was exactly what your soulmate was beginning to notice. And listen to this. The first real piece of evidence appeared completely by accident. They weren't searching for it. They weren't investigating. They weren't expecting anything unusual. Yet somehow they stumbled upon something that immediately caught their attention. At first glance, it seemed harmless. A simple interaction. A simple exchange. A simple moment. But something about it didn't fit. Something about it felt unusual. The more they looked at it, the stranger it became. And your heart needs this right now because intuition often reacts before understanding arrives. The feeling appeared first. The explanation came later. That feeling refused to disappear. Instead, it became stronger. More persistent. More difficult to ignore. And listen to this. Your soulmate began paying closer attention. Not obsessively. Not aggressively. Simply observing. Watching. Listening. Noticing. And what they noticed surprised them. Certain stories didn't match. Certain explanations felt incomplete. Certain details seemed strangely inconsistent. Individually they meant very little. Together they meant much more. Because patterns were beginning to form. And your heart needs this right now because patterns reveal truths that isolated moments often hide. One coincidence is easy to dismiss. Two coincidences feel unusual. Three coincidences demand attention. Your soulmate was now seeing far more than three. And listen to this. One evening, while reflecting on everything, they started connecting events they had previously viewed separately. A conversation from weeks ago. An unusual reaction from days ago. A strange comment that seemed insignificant at the time. Suddenly all of them seemed connected. Like puzzle pieces scattered across a table. Pieces that finally began fitting together. And the picture they created was unsettling. Very unsettling. Because your heart needs this right now, because sometimes the most uncomfortable part of discovering the truth is realizing how long the clues were visible. The signs had been there. The details had been there. The warnings had been there. Yet understanding had not arrived until now. That realization hit hard. And listen to this. For several moments, your soulmate simply sat in silence. Thinking. Processing. Reflecting. Trying to determine whether they were seeing reality or fear. Trying to determine whether their concerns were justified. Trying to determine whether the evidence truly meant what it appeared to mean. Because nobody wants painful conclusions to be true. Nobody wants trust to be broken. Nobody wants loyalty to become a question. And your heart needs this right now because hope often argues against reality. Hope searches for better explanations. Hope searches for alternatives. Hope searches for reasons everything might still be okay. Your soulmate searched for those reasons too. Yet each explanation eventually collapsed. Each excuse eventually weakened. Each possibility eventually led back to the same concern. And listen to this. The next discovery changed everything. Not because it was dramatic. Because it was undeniable. A small detail. A simple detail. A detail that should not have existed. Yet there it was. Clear. Visible. Impossible to ignore. The moment they saw it, their heart sank. Because suddenly the pattern became much easier to understand. The puzzle pieces aligned. The confusion decreased. The mystery weakened. The truth moved closer. And your heart needs this right now because evidence creates clarity. Clarity is not always comfortable. But clarity is powerful. Clarity removes uncertainty. Clarity removes endless speculation. Clarity forces reality into view. That reality was becoming increasingly difficult to avoid. And listen to this. Your soulmate started reviewing everything one final time. Every memory. Every observation. Every strange moment. Every unusual interaction. They wanted certainty. Not assumptions. Not guesses. Certainty. The more they reviewed the evidence, the more one realization emerged. Something important had been hidden. Something important had been concealed. Something important had remained just beneath the surface. And now that surface was beginning to crack. Because your heart needs this right now because secrets require constant protection. The moment protection weakens, the truth starts escaping. That was exactly what was happening. The truth was escaping. Slowly. Steadily. Inevitably. And listen to this. What frightened your soulmate most wasn't the evidence itself. It was what the evidence suggested. Because evidence creates questions. Questions create possibilities. And some possibilities are painful to consider. For a moment, they wished they had never noticed anything. Wished they had remained unaware. wished they had never started connecting the dots. But deep down they knew something important. Ignoring reality would not change reality. Pretending would not create answers. Avoiding the truth would not make it disappear. And your heart needs this right now, because courage often begins with accepting what we do not want to see. That acceptance was beginning now. Not fully. Not completely. But enough. Enough to continue searching. Enough to continue asking questions. Enough to continue moving toward the truth. And listen to this. By the end of the night, your soulmate understood one thing with complete certainty. The mystery was real. The questions were valid. The answers existed. And sooner or later, those answers would have to face the light. Because the evidence was growing. The truth was approaching. And the secret was becoming harder to hide with every passing day. If this message is touching your heart, take a moment to like this video and share your thoughts in the comments. Don't skip. Listen to this carefully. This message is for you, and your heart needs this right now, because after days of questions, sleepless nights, strange coincidences, and evidence that refused to disappear, your soulmate finally arrived at the moment they had been trying to avoid. The confrontation. And listen to this. They didn't want conflict. They didn't want arguments. They didn't want drama. In fact, if given the choice, they would have preferred a simple explanation. A harmless misunderstanding. A reasonable answer. Something that could make all the confusion disappear. But deep down, they already sensed something important. The answers they were about to receive might change everything. And your heart needs this right now, because there comes a point when unanswered questions become heavier than uncomfortable truths. Your soulmate had reached that point. Silence was no longer helping. Waiting was no longer helping. Ignoring the situation was no longer helping. Only honesty remained. And listen to this. The confrontation didn't happen dramatically. There were no loud voices. No sudden accusations. No emotional explosions. At least not at first. Instead, it began with a simple question. A question that seemed ordinary, yet carried enormous weight. A question that had been building for days. Perhaps even weeks. The moment it was spoken, the atmosphere changed. Everything became still. Everything became serious. Everything became real. Because your heart needs this right now, because truth often enters a room quietly before it changes everything inside it. That was exactly what happened. The question lingered. Waiting for an answer. Waiting for clarity. Waiting for honesty. And listen to this. The response arrived slowly. Too slowly. A hesitation. A pause. A moment of uncertainty. Most people would not have noticed it. But your soulmate noticed. Because when someone has been searching for truth, every detail suddenly matters. Every reaction. Every expression. Every silence. And the silence that followed felt louder than words. And your heart needs this right now, because sometimes people reveal more through hesitation than through explanation. That hesitation created another question. Then another. Then another. The conversation continued. Yet something felt different now. The confidence that once existed had disappeared. The certainty had disappeared. The comfort had disappeared. The truth was beginning to push its way to the surface. And listen to this. Your soulmate remained calm. Far calmer than anyone expected. Because deep down, they understood something important. Anger creates noise. But clarity requires focus. So they listened. Carefully. Patiently. Attentively. Every answer received their full attention. Every explanation received careful consideration. Every detail received scrutiny. And your heart needs this right now because real answers survive examination. False answers often struggle under it. That realization became increasingly obvious. The more questions appeared, the weaker certain explanations became. The weaker certain explanations became. The stronger the truth appeared. And listen to this. At one point, the conversation reached a standstill. Nobody knew what to say next. Nobody knew how to move forward. The room felt heavy. The tension felt unavoidable. Because everyone involved understood something. The conversation was no longer about a single event. It was about trust. Trust that had been questioned. Trust that had been tested. Trust that now stood at the center of everything. And your heart needs this right now because trust is fragile. It takes time to build. It takes consistency to maintain. Yet a single moment can force people to question everything they thought they knew. That was exactly what your soulmate was experiencing. And listen to this. For a brief moment, they hoped they were wrong. They genuinely hoped the evidence had been misleading. They genuinely hoped the signs had been misunderstood. They genuinely hoped there was another explanation waiting to appear. But every new answer seemed to create another inconsistency. Every clarification created another question. Every explanation left another gap. The puzzle pieces continued connecting. And the picture becoming visible was not the one they wanted to see. And your heart needs this right now because painful truths rarely become less painful when delayed. Eventually they must be faced. Eventually they must be acknowledged. Eventually they must be understood. That understanding was arriving now. Slowly. Relentlessly. Inevitably. And listen to this. The confrontation continued far longer than expected. Not because anyone wanted it to. Because too much remained unresolved. Too many questions remained unanswered. Too many details demanded clarification. Your soulmate found themselves learning things they never expected to learn. Discovering things they never expected to discover. Realizing things they never expected to realize. Each revelation carried weight. Each revelation carried consequences. Each revelation pushed the truth further into the light. And your heart needs this right now because secrets become difficult to maintain once honesty enters the conversation. The walls protecting them begin weakening. The excuses begin collapsing. The contradictions begin appearing. That process had already begun. And listen to this. At one specific moment, everything shifted. Not because of a dramatic confession. Not because of undeniable proof. Because of realization. A realization that suddenly connected everything. Every clue. Every strange interaction. Every unexplained detail. Every uncomfortable feeling. The entire story finally made sense. The mystery that once felt impossible to understand suddenly became clear. Painfully clear. And your heart needs this right now because clarity often arrives all at once after a long period of confusion. One moment you're uncertain. The next moment everything makes sense. That moment had arrived. And nothing felt the same afterward. And listen to this. For several seconds, nobody spoke. There was nothing left to say. The truth had already spoken for itself. The answers had already revealed themselves. The reality had already become visible. What remained was acceptance. Acceptance of what happened. Acceptance of what was discovered. Acceptance of what would come next. Because your heart needs this right now, because every confrontation eventually reaches a point where facts stop changing and decisions begin. Your soulmate had reached that point. The search for answers was ending. The search for truth was ending. The search for clarity was ending. Now a different journey was beginning. The journey of deciding what happens after the truth is known. And that journey would change everything. Join our spiritual community by subscribing and keeping notifications on, so you never miss a message meant for your soul. Don't skip. Listen to this carefully. This message is for you, and your heart needs this right now. Because after the confrontation ended and the difficult questions had finally been asked, your soulmate walked away believing one thing. The truth was still incomplete. The story was still unfinished. The answers were still hidden behind layers of silence. And listen to this. For a brief moment, they considered stepping away. Leaving everything behind. Accepting uncertainty. Accepting partial answers. Accepting the idea that some secrets are never fully revealed. But something inside them refused to settle. Refused to ignore the unanswered questions. Refused to accept confusion as closure. Because your heart needs this right now, because genuine truth has a powerful quality. It keeps demanding attention. It keeps demanding clarity. It keeps demanding exposure. No matter how hard people try to bury it. That was exactly what was happening. And listen to this. The days following the confrontation felt strange. Very strange. The atmosphere around everything had changed. Conversations felt different. Silences felt different. Even ordinary interactions felt different. It was as if everyone suddenly understood that something important was waiting beneath the surface. Something unresolved. Something unfinished. Something that could no longer remain hidden forever. And your heart needs this right now, because secrets often become heavier after they are questioned. Before exposure, they survive comfortably in darkness. After exposure begins, maintaining them becomes exhausting. Every explanation requires another explanation. Every excuse requires another excuse. Every hidden detail requires protection. Eventually the weight becomes too much. That weight was beginning to show. And listen to this. Your soulmate started noticing changes. Small changes. Subtle changes. Yet meaningful changes. Certain people seemed nervous. Certain conversations seemed carefully controlled. Certain subjects suddenly became difficult to discuss. At first these changes seemed insignificant. Yet together they revealed something important. Pressure was building. The truth was creating pressure. And pressure changes everything. Because your heart needs this right now, because maintaining deception requires constant effort. Maintaining honesty requires only truth. That difference eventually becomes impossible to hide. Your soulmate was beginning to witness that reality firsthand. And listen to this. One evening they found themselves replaying everything again. Every clue. Every conversation. Every inconsistency. Every reaction. For the first time, they noticed something they had previously overlooked. The story people were telling kept changing. Not dramatically. Not obviously. Just enough. Enough to create doubt. Enough to create questions. Enough to create concern. And suddenly another realization appeared. Truth rarely changes. Only stories do. That realization felt impossible to ignore. And your heart needs this right now, because consistency is one of the strongest signs of honesty. When reality exists, it remains stable. When deception exists, it often requires constant adjustment. Constant correction. Constant management. Your soulmate was beginning to see exactly that. And listen to this. The deeper they looked, the more difficult everything became to explain away. The coincidences no longer felt like coincidences. The unanswered questions no longer felt accidental. The strange details no longer felt insignificant. Instead, they appeared connected. Connected by something hidden. Connected by something unspoken. Connected by a truth desperately trying to reach the surface. And your heart needs this right now, because truth has patience. Extraordinary patience. People can delay it. People can deny it. People can avoid it. Yet eventually it returns. Again. And again. And again. Until it can no longer be ignored. That moment was approaching. And listen to this. For a while, your soulmate wondered whether exposing everything was worth it. Whether the answers would create peace. Whether the truth would bring relief. Whether clarity would justify the pain. Those questions remained difficult. Because some truths hurt. Some revelations disappoint. Some answers change lives. Yet another realization eventually appeared. The pain of truth is temporary. The pain of uncertainty can last forever. That realization changed everything. Because your heart needs this right now, because clarity may hurt, but confusion slowly drains the soul. Clarity allows healing. Clarity allows decisions. Clarity allows growth. Confusion allows none of those things. Your soulmate understood that now. more clearly than ever before. And listen to this. As the days continued passing, new information kept appearing. Not dramatic information. Not shocking revelations. Small details. Tiny details. Yet each one pointed in the same direction. Each one reinforced the same concern. Each one weakened the same secret. It was almost as if reality itself was slowly exposing what someone desperately wanted hidden. And your heart needs this right now because secrets often collapse gradually before they collapse completely. The foundation weakens. The cracks appear. The structure becomes unstable. Then eventually everything gives way. That process had already begun. And there was no stopping it now. And listen to this. The people involved may have believed they still controlled the situation. They may have believed the truth remained hidden. They may have believed enough uncertainty still existed. But your soulmate could feel something changing. The balance was shifting. The silence was weakening. The truth was gaining strength. And once truth gains momentum, it becomes very difficult to stop. Because your heart needs this right now because honesty has a natural power. A power that grows stronger the closer it gets to daylight. A power that grows stronger the closer it gets to acknowledgement. A power that grows stronger the closer it gets to exposure. That power was growing now. Slowly. Steadily. Inevitably. And listen to this. One particular realization finally removed all remaining doubt. Not because it revealed everything. Because it revealed enough. Enough to understand the situation. Enough to understand the deception. Enough to understand why so much effort had been spent protecting the secret. For the first time, your soulmate stopped searching for alternative explanations. Stopped searching for comforting possibilities. Stopped searching for reasons to ignore reality. Because reality had become impossible to ignore. And your heart needs this right now because acceptance often arrives before complete proof. Acceptance arrives when the pattern becomes undeniable. Acceptance arrives when the story finally makes sense. Acceptance arrives when the heart stops arguing with what the eyes can already see. That acceptance had arrived. And once it arrived, everything changed. And listen to this. The truth was no longer hiding. The truth was no longer waiting. The truth was no longer whispering from the shadows. It was standing directly in front of them. Perhaps not fully revealed. Perhaps not fully understood. But visible enough. Clear enough. Strong enough. And now only one chapter remained. The final revelation. The moment when everything hidden would finally be forced into the open. The moment when uncertainty would finally end. The moment when the truth would stand alone. Don't skip. Listen to this carefully. This message is for you, and your heart needs this right now. Because after every clue, every uncomfortable question, every sleepless night, and every painful realization, your soulmate has finally arrived at the moment where everything hidden is about to be revealed. And listen to this. For a long time, uncertainty controlled the story. Questions controlled the story. Fear controlled the story. Nobody knew exactly what was true. Nobody knew exactly what was false. Nobody knew exactly how deep the secret went. Yet one thing became increasingly obvious. The truth was getting closer. Closer every day. Closer every conversation. Closer every revelation. And your heart needs this right now because truth has a way of moving toward the light, even when people desperately try to keep it hidden. That is exactly what was happening. The secret was losing strength. The silence was losing strength. The deception was losing strength. And the truth was growing stronger. And listen to this. The final revelation did not arrive dramatically. There was no movie-like moment. No perfect confession. No sudden explosion of answers. Instead, it arrived through understanding. A complete understanding. A moment where every missing piece finally found its place. A moment where every unanswered question finally received context. A moment where confusion transformed into clarity. And your heart needs this right now because clarity changes everything. Before clarity, people wonder. After clarity, people decide. Before clarity, people hesitate. After clarity, people act. Your soulmate was entering that stage now. The stage where understanding becomes impossible to reverse. And listen to this. As the final pieces connected, they suddenly realized something important. The secret itself was never the entire story. The deception itself was never the entire story. The affair itself was never the entire story. The real story was trust. Trust that had been taken for granted. Trust that had been tested. Trust that had been stretched beyond its limits. Because your heart needs this right now because betrayal hurts for one reason above all others. It damages trust. And once trust is questioned, everything else begins changing too. That realization hit harder than any evidence ever could. And listen to this. For several moments, your soulmate simply sat in silence. No anger. No shouting. No dramatic reaction. Just silence. The kind of silence that arrives when reality finally settles into place. The kind of silence that arrives when denial has nowhere left to hide. The kind of silence that arrives when the truth becomes undeniable. And your heart needs this right now because acceptance often arrives quietly. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Quietly. One realization at a time. That acceptance was arriving now. And listen to this. As they reflected on everything that happened, another truth appeared. A truth even bigger than the original discovery. The secret had already taken enough. Enough energy. Enough attention. Enough emotional space. Enough power. Your soulmate realized they no longer wanted to give it control. Because your heart needs this right now because the purpose of truth is not endless suffering. The purpose of truth is freedom. Freedom from confusion. Freedom from uncertainty. Freedom from living inside unanswered questions. That freedom was finally becoming possible. And listen to this. The final revelation wasn't simply about who was involved. It wasn't simply about what happened. It was about understanding reality clearly enough to move forward. Without illusions. Without denial. Without false hope. For the first time in a very long time, your soulmate could finally see the situation exactly as it was. Not better. Not worse. Simply as it was. And that clarity felt powerful. Because clarity creates strength. And your heart needs this right now because strength often appears after disappointment. Not before it. People discover their resilience only after they need it. People discover their courage only after they are tested. People discover their wisdom only after painful lessons arrive. Your soulmate was discovering all three. And listen to this. The final chapter was not about revenge. It was not about punishment. It was not about anger. It was about truth. Pure truth. The truth that finally ended the guessing. The truth that finally ended the confusion. The truth that finally ended the endless questions. And once that truth became visible, something unexpected happened. Peace began appearing. Slowly. Very slowly. But undeniably. Because your heart needs this right now because uncertainty creates anxiety. Truth creates direction. Even painful truth creates direction. Your soulmate finally had direction. And listen to this. They looked back on the entire journey. The first clue. The first suspicion. The first unanswered question. The first uncomfortable realization. Everything suddenly made sense. Every moment had been leading here. Every clue had been pointing here. Every question had been preparing them for this revelation. And now that it had finally arrived, there was nothing left to chase. Nothing left to uncover. Nothing left to expose. Only decisions remained. Decisions about the future. Decisions about trust. Decisions about what comes next. And your heart needs this right now because truth does not write the next chapter. People do. Truth simply hands them the pen. And listen to this. For the first time since the mystery began, your soulmate felt something unexpected. Not confusion. Not fear. Not uncertainty. Confidence. Confidence that they could handle reality. Confidence that they could move forward. Confidence that they no longer needed to live inside unanswered questions. Because once the truth becomes visible, its power to intimidate begins fading. And that is exactly what happened. The secret lost its power. The deception lost its power. The uncertainty lost its power. And the truth stood alone. Clear. Visible. Unavoidable. And strangely enough, liberating. Because your heart needs this right now because the greatest victory was never exposing the secret. The greatest victory was escaping the confusion it created. The greatest victory was reclaiming clarity. Reclaiming peace. Reclaiming strength. And that is where the story finally ends. Not with a secret. Not with a betrayal. Not with a revelation. But with understanding. The understanding that truth eventually finds its way into the light. The understanding that clarity eventually replaces confusion. and the understanding that once reality is finally seen clearly, the future can finally begin. Before you go, please like, comment, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. May peace, light, and blessings always be with you.